So, hello everyone. I want to warmly welcome you all to our first webinar for the BASE project, which we want to revolutionize basically the battery supply chains with the digital battery passports. And I'm very privileged to be presenting to you today. I would like to start the presentation. Basically, we will be presenting the BASE project, which is BASE Battery Passport for Transparency and Circularity, and then Battery Passport for Resilient Supply Chain and Implementation of Circular Economy is the extended name of BASE, and that's more or less the name also implies our main goals within the project. Today is our first in the webinar series that we have for BASE, and then we will have three presentations that through these three presentations, we will be introducing the BASE project. The first presentation would be basically done by me. And just to give you a brief introduction about myself, I'm Shahin Jamali, and I'm working at Fraunhofer IEG. I'm basically the head of monitoring and artificial intelligence, and I have the privilege to be coordinating the BASE project. I will give you an introduction to the BASE project, and then we will go to Mr. Sohag Salahuddin. He is a head of product at Technovative Solutions. Basically, they are also the main developers of the digital battery passport platform within the BASE project, and the presentation will be from EU regulations to real-world impact, the journey and solution behind the digital battery passport. Last but not least, we will go to the third presentation. It will be presented by Ms. Mariana Ralikova. She's the Director of Business Development at Seraph, and Mariana is also our Exploitation Manager within the BASE project. And the presentation will be based beyond the horizon, shaping the future of battery innovation and commercialization. So just moving into the project introduction and give you a little bit of information about BASE project. The BASE project is a Horizon Europe project with the topic ID that you see in the middle of the circle. And basically, the BASE project is a Horizon Innovation Action that has been basically initiated with a Battery for EU partnership. The project started basically on 1st of June 2024, and the duration of the project is for 36 months, meaning from 2024 to 2027, we will be running the project. We have basically an estimated project cost of 8.9 million, with around 6.1 as EU contributions and the rest being basically supported by the industrial partners within the consortium. We have 19 partners of excellence from 12 countries around the globe, actually not only Europe, that you see on the right column over there, the consortium partners. So we have 19 partners, and basically the consortium is the project being coordinated by Fraunhofer. Including these 19 partners, we have also 3 Fraunhofer institutions, including IEG, Fraunhofer ISE, and Fraunhofer Sky. So in total, this is what the consortium consists of. And one of the main aspects that we have within the project is to be able to demonstrate what we are developing. And we have actually 4 use case, real case demonstrations, including the eBus EV platform, Frugal EV platform, marine demonstration, and also stationary use cases. I will go into more details, but this is basically the scope of the project in a nutshell. Moving forward, so we have a project goal that we want to achieve, and it could be basically summarized in develop, validate, and implement a working digital battery passport that is also mandated by the EU regulations. Within the EU regulations, there will be a lot to discuss about, which you will basically hear more about in the next presentations. But to just give you an overview of the value chain and how this DBP will be implemented, so every battery will be starting with mining the critical raw materials or the materials for the battery. It will go to the refineries for refining. Then we have precursors and cathode active materials, you know better than me. And then we would have battery cells. And then when the battery is created, the first life cycle of the battery starts. It's, for example, it can go to an electrical vehicle, to the EV. And then we would have initiated the first battery passport, and then going forward within the value chain and also the life cycle of this battery, it will reach a point in time that the battery needs to go to the next stage of its life, and then the start of the remanufacturing and repurposing stages begin, and then we will go to the second life stage of the battery, which may be the reusing of that. And then that would be also the next step, that the battery passport needs to be there. And then while it goes through the second life, let's just say it would be reused in a stationary use case. When that life cycle also finishes, then the battery needs to go to recycling. And from recycling, when that process is conducted and completed, it goes back to the value chain through the precursor and cathode material productions. So when you consider this whole image of the life cycle of the battery, there is a need to be able to track, trace, and transparently and securely follow this process, and also enhance the repurposing, reusing, recycling, and remanufacturing of the batteries within the circular economy. And that's more or less the scope of what we are trying to achieve within the whole life cycle. And then to just give you more details, I would go to the next slide. There are some challenges to achieve what I just described to you. One of the main ones would be the lack of traceability and sustainability within the supply chain that I just described to you. At the same time, there is lack or insufficient resiliency in the supply chain. And when you consider both of these, at the same time, when we think about all these 4R methodologies from reuse to recycling, then there is a lack of circularity and room for improvement of circularity within the battery value chain. And then when all these challenges are considered, then we come up to the objectives of the base project to basically tackle and solve these challenges or overcome them. And then the main objectives accordingly would be basically to develop a trusted and interoperable digital battery passport framework and platform, and then also to ensure within this digital battery passport framework that we have track and traceability within the whole life cycle from cradle to grave of the batteries. While we are trying to do that, this is the bare bones structure. We would also employ advanced analytical and also AI-based techniques to estimate the battery performance and also the safety indicators within the life cycle of the battery. And when we put that aside, we also have a strong focus on the 4R methodologies that would basically improve the circularities. And then we have been, and we will be developing circularity indicators by considering these 4Rs, namely, one more time, reduce, repair, reuse, and recycling aspects, which would go back to the circularity aspect within the value chain. At the same time, once everything is being done, one needs to have a strong focus, which is one of the main things that we are also focusing within the project, is to develop ESGE. Normally, you're accustomed to the ESG, but then the ESGE toolkit and indicator that we are developing within the project would be a tool to have a harmonized toolkit for environmental, social, governance, and also economic aspects within the whole value chain. And then when everything is done, at the same time, one needs to be exploiting the developed platform and also the developed tools. And then this comes back to developing a business model to promote the circular economy within the value chain. And when all we have done and developed, it needs to be demonstrated. And then going back to what I initially proposed, we have 4 use case real-world demonstrations that we would take as an opportunity to demonstrate and validate all the concepts and developments that we have done. And these will have a lot of impacts, which you see in the impact section here. But basically, this would bring the improvements to the challenges that I just mentioned, such as bringing transparent calculation methods for the battery indicators, encouraging new business models within different paths within the battery value chain. Also, we have safety indicators, which would bring improvements to the battery transportation and workforce. The solutions will be tested and demonstrated. So we have tested solutions throughout the value chain, while at the same time, we are promoting sustainability and circularity through our 4R strategies. All in all, when all is done, bringing the circularity, we will have increasing the competitiveness of the European battery industry, and at the same time, hopefully reduce the strategic dependencies of critical raw materials by promoting resource efficiencies through the 4 Rs that I just described. So going a little bit more into the depths and more technical aspects, we have the concept and architecture of the base project. So basically, when looking at the left side, we have the architecture of the base digital battery passport. And then it starts with the foundation and the most fundamental layer, and that's the physical layer. And the physical layer basically consists of entities starting from minor refiners down to manufacturers and recyclers, which basically will be providing and contributing the data and the actions. Then as the next layer within the platform, we would have the service layer, and this layer basically will be responsible to authenticate, authorize, create the data space, and also have the DLT-based data audit, meaning that these services will ensure secure and controlled access to the data. The next 2 ones would be analytics and data space, which I just previously introduced. We will have the state of access, such as a state of charge, a state of energy, and a state of health for the batteries, the circularity indexes, the life cycle analysis, and the ESG. These will be predictive AI and analytics that we have that would be based on the data that is provided within the service layer. And then we have another layer, the database and data store, which would be basically, this layer would be responsible to manage the predictive AI and analytics results. These two together will be feeding the last layer, that is basically the user-facing interface, and that's what the users will be seeing. And then that layer would be basically responsible for the user management, the partner management, what data is being registered, and also it will be acting as a semantic hub. This architecture that I just presented can be basically transferred into the circular concept that you can see basically here on the right. And this one, when you consider the DBP-based DBP platform, then what will happen, this is a representation of what can be achieved through this architecture. And then when you look at the top part within the frameworks and methods, these are these intelligent analytic tools mainly that are responsible for compliance scanning, for safety analysis, for business analysis, and also the state of X analysis. And these 2 main parts, including the identity controls, will basically allow the stakeholders to inform, instruct, promote, and predict aspects of the battery health and battery compliance. And then when you look at the bottom half, we have the data spaces and interfaces for that, and these basically will support the data sharing, traceability, and authenticity of the data for the storing and protection of the data. And within these services that is on the right side of the bottom part, we would have basically the dynamic and static data collection that would basically enable us to store and collect securely the dynamic and the static data, and then basically somehow represent it and visualize it and give access through IDs, barcodes, and certificates. So this is more or less the core concept and the architecture of the base project. And then while all these being developed, they need to be demonstrated. Then we have 4 use cases to demonstrate all the aspects that I just described to you. And then we have the main focus of the use cases are within 4 different sectors of the battery industry. The first one being an eBus EV platform, production pilot from Mercedes-Benz, which is a project partner of us. We will have a frugal EV platform production pilot from Ford Motors. We have the use case number 3, that would be electrical tugboat production pilot that is from Navtec. And then we have also a stationary one that basically goes to the second life aspect of the batteries. And we would have this storage production pilot from our partner B Planet. So what do we want to achieve? In a nutshell is that we want to also demonstrate that we have a secure and reliable access to this federated digital battery passport infrastructure. And then we can do that also in a transparent, accurate, and reliable manner using the battery indicators, and also demonstrate that within a realistic product development lifecycle, the base digital battery passport can be implemented. As the last slide, just going into the depths of how the project will look like, basically the work package structure or the work flow of the project consists of 9 main work packages, the base project, and it starts with 2 main work packages, work package 1 and 9, which would run for the entirety of the project, and that's basically project management and administration. And then on the right side, you will have work package 9, that's communication, dissemination, and exploitation. And all these management, communication, dissemination, and exploitation would ensure proper aspects in these to have equality results at the end of the project. And when we go into the inner circle, we have the technical work packages. We start with work package 2, that's for defining the solution requirements and the key performance indicators, which would feed the main developments, the technical developments, which would be basically going from work package 3 to 5, and that would be the battery performance indicators and state of excess, as I just presented to you. Then we have work package 4 for the circularity aspects, work package 5 for the ESG indicators, and these 3 in parallel to the developments for the battery passport and platform will be feeding and be united as the digital battery passport framework and platform in total, which would result into the industrial applications and validation in work package 7, which is our use case demonstrations, and hand in hand with the business modeling and developments for the validations and the developments. So that would be basically the introduction to the base project. I want to thank you all for your attention, and now I want to give the floor to my good colleague, Sohag Salahuddin. He would be presenting the next presentation.
Right, thank you, Shaheen, again. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here talking to all of you. My name is Sohag, and I'm the head of product at Technical Solutions, as Shaheen mentioned before. Over the next 10 to 15 minutes, my aim is to kind of provide high-level overview of the digital product passport, including its implementation timeline, connecting to the regulations that Shaheen was talking about, its scope, data requirements, data management, and then finally kind of talk about some of the mock-up designs that we have done for the battery passport. So let's get back to the kind of basics of DPP. So what is DPP? DPP is essentially a tool that is designed to collect and share essential data about a product throughout its whole life cycle, focusing mainly around sustainability, environmental impact, recyclability, etc. It aims to provide valuable information in categories like product details, labels, certification, carbon footprint, supply chain practices, material composition, essentially all aimed at promoting product sustainability from creation to disposal. So why do we need that? It plays a key role in driving the shift towards circular economy by minimizing waste and extending the lifespan of resources and products, solves the long-standing issues of transparency and traceability in the production industry. It also enables all stakeholders, including businesses, consumers, governments, to kind of optimize the use, reuse, and recycling of the valuable resources, which Shaheen kind of touched on as well. And finally, EU has enshrined this as part of the regulation, means we have to do it regardless, right? So in terms of when we have to do it, the initiative sets a clear timeline for adoption, with battery product groups to be expected, the first product group to implement DPPs around the beginning of 2027. The other product groups or other sectors will also follow by 2030. In terms of who will be impacted by it in the whole supply chain of a product, every single actor, from material supplier to the end consumer, everyone will have access and some part to play in creation and also realization of the benefit of the passport itself. Let's move to the next slide. Oops. Here we go. Now, I talked about kind of EU's commitment in terms of making the, enshrining this as part of the regulations. You can see from the screen, from their commitment, they see DPP as the kind of first regulatory mover at scale. They're mandating DPP across various different industries with a clear timeline, as I kind of mentioned before, with batteries being in 2027. DPP regulation will have major impact on global supply chain, since almost nothing is produced and sourced within the same geolocation. For example, if you talk about textiles in Europe, most of the supplies are actually coming from Asia into the EU market. So how these regulations gets implemented will have a major impact on the whole industry. And you can see from this, the picture in front of you that how DPP is almost kind of, at the center of all of the different regulations that are being implemented across various different product groups in Europe. And it doesn't stop there. You can see here, there are some other regulations that are also kind of linking DPP. For example, Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, Green Claims Directive, and CSRD, which is a Corporate Sustainability Reporting. And I'm sure Mariana will touch more on that as well later. But when it comes to battery passport, to bring all of these regulations together, you can see it didn't just pop up out of kind of nowhere. Back in March 2022, EU launched the SPI regulation, which stands for Sustainable Products Initiative, which included the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products regulations, and kind of set the stage for DPP to facilitate the transition to a circular economy across various product categories. And before the ESPR rules, you also had new battery regulations coming in, replacing some of the existing regulations. And this new battery regulation comes into effect, mandating kind of comprehensive lifecycle management for batteries, including the use of digital battery passport for certain type of batteries. ESPR is one of the kind of more important regulation for not just for battery, for other product groups as well. When it comes to DPP, and I wanted to kind of focus a bit more on ESPR. It's essentially part of the package of rules following the 2020 Circular Economy Action Plan, which came into effect very recently, aimed towards an environmentally sustainable and circular economy. What does really sustainable product means? I guess anyone in this room would probably be able to, give the answer to that question. But essentially, it's any product that is using less energy, has a longer usage period, that is easily repairable, has parts which may be quite easily disassembled and put to further use, fewer substances of concerns. All of these kind of characteristics will basically define a product that is a sustainable product. One of the most important thing about being a sustainable product as part of ESPR is actually having improved availability of information on its sustainability, and that's where DPP comes in. Now, as I said, it covers almost all product groups that you can think of, apart from maybe one or two, but generally it covers iron, steel, aluminium, batteries, electronics, energy-related products, including wind turbine blades, furniture, textiles, footwear, chemicals, paints, lubricants, anything that you can think about. In terms of the ESPR timeline, it all started back in March 22 as part of the EU Circular Economy Action Plan, as I kind of mentioned. Oops, I moved to slide too early. But various milestones have been achieved, including the adoption by the EU Parliament as well as the Council in 2024. There are remaining steps to be taken, such as the adoption of ESPR Working Plan, which is coming next year in April 2025. Then you have July 2026, when a digital registry will be created by the Commission to store all the unique identifiers of DPPs in a secure way. As I said before, batteries will be the first product group that will enter into force in 2027. Rest of the product groups will just come into effect post 2030, and there will be ESPR efficiency report that will be published by EU as well every 6 years after that. So the first one, I think, we would expect in 2036. In terms of the scope of battery passport, it's going to be any batteries that is over 2 kilowatts, but you can put them into 3 different categories. So it's the electric vehicles batteries, LNT batteries like e-bikes and e-scooters, industry batteries like batteries used in agricultural activities, energy storage, traction in other transport vehicles, including rail, ships, boats, aviation. And as part of the base project, we are kind of looking at least 3 of those. We've got the Mercedes and Ford. We've got Navtec with shipping. We also have Big Planet with storage solution. In terms of data that you're going to require for creating the passport, not just ESPR, but other regulations within battery specifically kind of comprehensively mentions what data we will require for the passport. So, for example, you're going to need general product and manufacturer information, i.e. model number, manufacturer name, date, place, etc., materials composition data, critical raw materials data, product chemistry, etc. You might need, carbon footprint, LCA data, due diligence report, sustainability report, recycle manual, spare parts information, as well as product performance data. Now, product performance data is quite relevant for us within the battery because, battery has a lot of dynamic use phase data that you'd want to collect and show to the end user coming from the BMS system. Now, how do we actually manage all of this data that I'm talking about? And there are 4 aspects to data management. So how you access the data, what level of access different users should have, how do we store the data, as well as all the security aspects of that data. In terms of accessing the data, it will be accessed via data carrier. You can think about QR code being a data carrier as well, but it's not just limited to QR code. I know that EU is currently doing some research around the efficiency and effectiveness of using, for example, NFC technology as well. Regardless of what we use to access the passport, it has to adhere to international standards and accessibility as well. If we think about QR codes, obviously that needs to be accessed via a device with a camera. In terms of access groups, the bottom line is that various stakeholders will have appropriate levels of access to the data based on their needs and roles following differentiated data access model. Generally, it can be put into kind of 3 high-level groups like general public, notified bodies, or market surveillance authorities, or any natural or legal person with a legitimate interest. But organizations will have the option to kind of further break down and have more access groups if they want to. In terms of storing the data, the product regulations suggest a decentralized data system for storing product passports data, which should be maintained by the economic operators, allowing flexibility and dynamism. It's kind of market driven, implying that it can adapt to the needs and innovations of the market more readily. Economic operators have the autonomy to manage their data in ways that kind of best suit their operations and compliance requirements. Being it's going to be decentralized, essentially inherently it means that it has a reduced risk of single point of failure. Economic operators are responsible for the data, but they may authorize DPP service providers like us to manage that data or store the data on their behalf. These service providers, as in us, we are not going to be able to sell or reuse or process the data beyond what is actually needed for compliance and operational purpose. So there is no risk there. The industry is also going for distributed ledger technology, which basically means greater encryption, mandating immutability, providing transparency and traceability. Once a transaction is recorded on a blockchain, it can't be altered or deleted by any single entity. And anything that you do afterwards gets basically added to the blockchain as well. So everything gets hashed and you can audit every single event. Within Base project, we are keeping the data security and privacy at the heart of the battery passport solution. We'll be making our DPP interoperable and working very closely with Catena X for data standards. We're also using some of the GaiaX standards resources in relation to the federated data infrastructure. Now, when it comes to implementing the battery passport, companies can face, or EU generally can face a number of various challenges. Now, this is not an exhaustive list, but I've got a few challenges that are quite obvious, and I'm sure people will appreciate knowing about them. So, number one, data collection standardization. Gathering comprehensive lifecycle data for products can be really complex, especially for companies that haven't really historically tracked any detailed environmental or sourcing information. This kind of lack of standardized data formats can hinder the interoperability between different systems and sectors, complicating the integration of product passports. You could also have changes in data, for example, any kind of post-sale of the battery, like repair or any follow-up events that can kind of get lost in the process. The battery performance indicator, they are not really harmonized at the moment, which means, that could also cause problems. There is a requirement for new passport for a remanufactured battery. Now, it is noted that remanufacturing and repurposing or undergoing certain treatment operations require issuing a new battery passport, but the challenge here would involve updating the static data like sourcing information or rated capacity that may be altered during this process. And there are others. I'm not going to go through every single line here, but differences in regulation could also have an issue. You could have different regulation in EU, different regulation in North America, and how we are dependent on a global supply chain means that if you have various different regulations with variations in it, adoption of passport, it's going to be really, really challenging there. Finally, I want to kind of talk about what we are building in terms of the user interface. You can see some mock-ups there. We're going to show all the data category that I've kind of touched on earlier within the passport. The QR code will be actually printed on the body of the battery itself. So anyone who wants to see the passport, they'll be able to scan the QR code from there and then view the passport. I've actually got a live passport on this screen. So if anyone wants to see a passport which is from a different category, product category, it's for a wind turbine. So you can actually scan it and see what a passport might look like. And it's not going to be, too different from what we are building for the battery product group. So obviously, it's only been 6 months. There's plenty to do for us. The project is going to run for 3 years, and hopefully, we can do this again when we have the passport ready, and we can show you how it works, in real time. But for today, you can see that the design, the technical aspects of building the passport is going on at its full speed. All right. Going to have to hand it over to Mariana, who's going to talk through about commercialization and the future of the passport. All right, Mariana, over to you.
So thank you to Sohag and Shaheen for explaining more about the background of the BASE project, why and how, and Sohag most focused on the regulation, the pathway to regulation requirements, and how we're translating those into the digital battery passport. This part of the presentation will focus more about how battery innovation and digital battery passport will shape each other essentially, how the challenges that already Sohag a little bit touched on will change into benefits and opportunities, and how in turn that will move into new ecosystems, business models, and partnerships that we foresee that will happen. So the next slide is very interesting, right? So there is today innovation. If we change to next slide. Yeah, excellent. So today's innovation already gave us full 3 key innovative elements. That's full traceability, optimized lifespan, and high recyclability. Now, these are not goals or ideals. These are capabilities that most of the companies already have. Now, granted, they are within different maturities, right? But they already have. Our research and insight basically says that if you have well-matured processes around these 3 elements, you might as well have a very good and strong control over the entire battery life cycle from sourcing to end of life. However, this slide is not about control over the battery life cycle. What we found is interesting, that these 3 key reasons or elements for innovation actually drive different behavioral patterns that link to blueprints of companies, right? You can't have one without the other. You can't claim you have full traceability and not have transparency and accountability. You can't claim you have optimized lifespan if you don't address durability and cost efficiency. And you can't claim your product battery is highly recyclable if you don't care about sustainability and resource recovery. So all these elements are actually going to be within, in one way or the other, Digital Battery Passport, and will help to address the key reasons. So if your company or a business has perhaps challenges addressing transparency, accountability, but you have full traceability, the Digital Battery Passport will help to address those. If we move to next slide, as we funnel on these key elements, right, behind innovation, we funnel on the key drivers. So rapid health assessment, enhanced safety mechanisms, circularity models, ESG indicators, AI, lifecycle and circularity assessments. So these, I want to preempt a question here. These are not new. You might think these are not new. We have that. Fantastic. But the answer lies in, do you have them in one platform? Do you have data and insights between those drivers connected in a way where you can use and exploit the data insights within different new business models? Sohag already talked about regulatory drivers, right? So I'm not going to talk about this, but essentially these key drivers, together with innovative elements I've mentioned before, lead towards Digital Battery Passport that will show you and enable you to have all data connected in one place. Now, as we move to the next slide, yes, thank you. Sohag, again, and Shaheen in different ways talked about challenges. And you can see, if you've listened carefully and actively, that everyone has talked about it from different angle, high level, medium level, and we now want to zoom in on the operational challenges, right? So Sohag mentioned there's so many different players in the supply chain, from small, medium enterprises, economic operators, OEMs, recyclers, miners, whoever you are. We kind of wanted to make it simple for you and divide the challenges into 2 buckets. There will be technical, so digital battery platform challenges that you might have, and there will be capabilities and resources, right? That's another bucket. The challenges will be different. And honestly, the list there is non-exhaustive because there just can be so many depending on how well your systems are connected, aligned, what type of systems you have, how well you care about your data. So master data management, hygiene, right? Different things there going on. But what our research tells us is that it will be the OEMs, so typically the Digital Battery Passport issuers, that will be impacted the most technically, just because of sheer amount of data and just the vast amount of processes and tools to connect, as Digital Battery Passport will need to be included within your ecosystem of tools and systems, right? And then on the other hand, we will have capabilities and resources bucket, so challenges there, where we see that small, medium enterprises will be impacted most, just purely because of the size and capabilities and resources and skills, etc. As we move to the next slide, challenges are just one part of the story, right? We also have benefits. We also have opportunities. So we don't want to paint the sort of negative picture here, because what we see is that the entire regulation, but mainly the digital battery pass-through platform, brings actually very interesting benefits if you just look in more detail. But above all, it has an impact on economic, environmental, social, and innovation spheres where we live. So if your company, and rightly so, I'm sure it is, caring about environment, social, environmental, and economic relationships, you will have an opportunity to see how digital battery passport impacts all of them. If we move to the next slide, this brings us to the new models. Shaheen, at the beginning of the presentation, talked about different model already, right? How we're going to work together. But essentially, we are moving from new, like linear model today's to renew model, right? So essentially, instead of having very simple one company producing new products, we're moving to a model where what's valued is a product, in our case, battery, that will be not only most durable, most recyclable, re-recyclable, most efficient. That's what is it about. So it's not that the strongest company will win or the biggest. It will be that where product will last the longest, where most of the product will be recyclable, and that will be evident and transparent within the digital battery passport or any platform you're going to use. You can see that on the right of your screen, you see different stakeholders. Again, these are non-exhaustive, so there's so many that you can add, but essentially, this is the key message. Your currency is no longer data only. Your currency in those partnerships is no longer trust only or efficiency. Your currency will be metrics and circularity credits within digital battery passport, because we are all in it together, especially whoever wants to import, export EU based in the EU, you will have to have it, right? However you are, whether you're a data receiver, data provider, or both, doesn't matter. All of them will have to be together in one basket, right? So that we will be actually exchanging the metrics and credits in an interesting way, and that's where it all comes together. If we move to the next slide, this has an animation. So I like this slide most because before we go into different potential business models, we are not saying that these are the only models that will be on the market. And we are not saying that digital battery passport will enable these models. What we are saying is these are ideas that we see through our research that came up. All right. And yes, Sohag, please go ahead and just type 2 more. So we have the 4 models. Excellent. So we see different type of models, right? What we are saying is that there is one commonality between those models, and that is that your data, as I mentioned, is your currency. If your data is good, if your insights from these data is good, it has a quality, what you're selling with this data is no longer a battery. It's how your battery will be traceable. You are going to be focusing on traceability, optimization, lifespan, health. So everything that you can actually work for and work towards will be put together in one digital battery passport. Again, as I said, these models can be used. You can feel free to build on those as a company. But essentially, we are looking at more about subscription fees, options for premium data, medium data, warranty fees will come in place, optional add-on fees for sustainability and carbon offset options, right? Transactions, subscription models, so different things that already actually exist. If you think of different industries, we pay already for our flights and carbon offsets, so we pay different things already. But this might be a new way of looking at how the revenue or where the revenue comes in. If we move to next slide, we prepared part of the base project is exploitation. Shaheen already mentioned about this. And we looked at like what can the digital battery passport bring among myriad of things. And we see it as both catalyst and enabler. That's very important, right? Because it helps industries to perform better in depth, transparency, but it also expands adoption across different sectors, right? It will have a kind of snowball effect in a positive sense. However, we realize that this language that we're using, the enabler and catalyst, actually applies to all of you. Whether you're OEM, you're economic operator, supplier, in any position you are either catalyst or enabler or both, whether you're directly or indirectly impacted. And this up to you, depending on how reactive or proactive you are towards the regulation and implementation of digital battery passport. It's up to you how you're going to play that role, enabler and catalyst role. Now, the last slide I have for you, and if we can move to the last slide, is, and I've seen a question, so maybe that answered the question. We've put together the list of most important regulations, and again, there's so many, and what comes into effect and what one needs to do, that it didn't fit on the slide. But here are the most important ones for you. Now, below, we kind of, thought of what might the key teams within each company do, what might they need to do to actually be ready for these regulations. What we came up with is very simple list, but what's important on this slide is following. Digital battery passport comes almost first after the sustainability reporting, so in February 2027. And in a way, if you really want to be ready for tomorrow, so other regulations that come into effect after digital battery passport, actually all the data sets, data flows that is within the DBP, so that digital battery passport will help you be prepared. Because most of them will be answering the requirements for reporting and transparency for most of these regulations within DBP. Okay. Now, this is the last slide, so I'll pass it to the next slide, and I'll give floor to Shaheen for managing the Q&A and just closing words.
So, thank you, Mariana. Really appreciate your presentation. Very informative. So I just want to thank everybody for their attention and their patience. Sohag, I think you closed the presentation. Can you bring it back, please? Okay, so thank you all for your attention. I really appreciate your presence and your time being here. And really want to say that I think you're really excited about our developments and what will happen with the digital battery passport. And we are also excited and would be basically honored to have you joining us within this journey. So we have a lot of ways that you can join us, starting with our base project website. That would be base-digipass.eu. So basically that would be our website. You can get more information and have a deep dive into what we are doing. It would be always up to date. And then you can, through that, you can always subscribe to our newsletter. You will receive the news automatically. If you have inquiries, questions, want to collaborate, we would be more than happy to get contacted by you. The email address is on the screen. And then I want to ask everyone, while we have a Q&A session coming up, while you're writing your questions or thinking about your questions, simply take out your phones, and then you can basically scan the QR code with your phone camera and then join us on the journey. We would have the possibility to subscribe to our newsletter or join us on LinkedIn for more professional news, or some short news on X platform, or some community in the Facebook. So we would love to have you in either of those. And at the same time, as the last point, I want to acknowledge and thank the European Union, which co-funded the project, and at the same time, all our partners, which are heavily working and participating with the contributions to the project. And now I would say that please scan the QR codes, take a photo, join us. We would be happy to have you. And as the last part of the presentation, I think we can move to the questions and answers section. Please write those. I think there are already some questions from the audience, and then I will start to ask them. So I would say we keep the QR codes on the screen. So if you could keep the QR code, so it would be great if everyone can just scan and join us in whichever way you would prefer to join us. So as I would now go to the questions. So we have one first question, and that is, as a battery analytics tool, would it make sense to provide operators with an updated battery passport for each battery we help them to manage? For example, integrated without your interface, or is it something they need to do themselves with no integration? So I would take over for this question myself. So the answer, if I understand the question correctly, would be the fact that we are developing the digital battery passport in our project in a modular format. So in case you as an analytics tool provider or the other way around want to integrate a module and you need the battery passport, or the other way around, then there would be a very easy possibility to integrate a solution, as we are integrating multiple solutions like our analytics tools, like circularity tools, and let's just say the ESG indicators and the business analytic AI methodology. So we are doing this in a modular way, and at the same time, I can say that any other tool can be very easily integrated and vice versa. So there is a very easy possibility to collaborate and integrate it into the platform, and there is no need for the operator themselves to integrate anything to their solutions. It would be modular and easy to integrate. The second question would be, I hope that I have answered the question. If not, then you can one more time in the question and answer section or the chat, propose your question. Okay, thank you. Then the next question would be, how will you ensure the security of the provided data? Maybe Sohag, if you want to
sure.
touch on that.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
Okay, great. So I think when you talk about security of the data, there are thousands of ways you can look at that, right? So if I understood it right, by security, if you're talking about, the issue around immutability, issues around data recovery, all of that kind of stuff. So this is just going to be a standard data management for this system, right? So first and foremost, as I've said in my presentation, we are going with kind of a DLT, distributed ledger technology for data storage. We are hashing all of the data onto blockchain, so no one can tamper with the data. In terms of data recovery, we are making sure that by following the ESPR guidelines, the data is hosted in multiple places, so there is no one single point of failure, right? So I hope that kind of answered the question, but if not, you can ask more specifically.
And Sohag, there is a follow-up question from another member of our audience, a follow-up to this, basically, and thank you for the answer. And the question is, how will you ensure the relocated data is of good quality and accuracy?
Relocated data?
Recollected data, my apologies.
Okay. So data recollection. So I'm guessing you're talking about the use phase information, right? When you have, I don't know, repair, refurbishment, or second life and stuff like that. So there is a challenge around that. And it's funny you asked this question because recently, as a team, we've been thinking about this challenge that we might face. So one way of doing it is, imagine as a battery producer, you have your own repair program, right? If you have your own repair program, you know your mechanics who will actually repair the battery, right? So if you have those known to you, as the economic operator, you can give access to those mechanics that you know as someone who can actually input data. Now, you wouldn't do that unless you trust their input. So they would have probably gone through some sort of certification or validation process with the economic operator directly. Now, the issue is going to be when you have someone who is doing something with the battery, but they are not necessarily, the economic operator verified user, for example. Now, there is a question you could ask, should we even give them access to provide data or not? So I think This is not completely refined in this case, so we still need to have a discussion and basically get the advice from the policymakers as well. How do we actually manage that? But in short, again, if you have trusted users who can input data, you can put that validation and certification process outside of the system itself to make sure you know that you are getting the right data, the right sort of input from the people that you trust. But we can also do validation within the system, but that needs to be discussed with the policymakers to see what is the best solution in that.
Thanks. So as we are running out of time, I still want to get some answers also from Mariana, I think, question. So with so many regulations coming into effect, how can OEMs prioritize their actions to meet both immediate and further requirements? And then also, are we in the right direction as the EU regulation timeline suggests for DPP? If you could maybe touch on that.
All right, thank you. So it's an excellent question. So look, the advice is that companies either see the regulations as isolated requirements or they see the regulations as part of their long-term transformation and strategy. So the latter one is the most important, that you adapt in a way your strategy and transformation so you can just easily follow the regulations and requirements. You already have started probably with the carbon footprint reporting under CSRD. So essentially, you have those foundational capabilities in data collection, and digital battery passport requirements will then build on those, right? So I already mentioned, and Sohag mentioned, that some of the data that is required in reporting will then be brought forward in digital battery passport. And that way, you're actually setting up a robust data infrastructure for other regulations as well. When it comes to whether you're right on track, actually just 5 minutes before midnight, as they say, right? Because if the regulation is coming into force in February 2027 and we are at the end of 2024, normally, so the larger companies, any new potential tool will take some sourcing, procurement, testing, making it live, right? So some companies need 1 year, some companies need 1.5 years. It really depends on how strong you are and how adaptable you are. But it's not only about a tool. It's about aligning your processes and data to fit that tool and then making that tool to part of your ecosystem. So the sooner you start, and we advise now, to start thinking how to implement digital battery passport, what would be your teams, who is going to be involved, what do you need, then that would put you on track to be ready in February 2027. So Hag, if there is anything that you want to add there.
No, I think you're spot on. Just one more thing I would say, if there is any industry partners on the call that are feeling nervous about this, please do get in touch. We've been working on this for a long time now. We've done enough research. We've got, in-house capability where we can actually come and talk to you and consult you in terms of making sure that you're on the right track. No strings attached. So we are just happy to help. If you need any help, please do get in touch.
Okay, one last question, because we are running out of time. Maybe Sohag, in 30 seconds,
Yep.
I think this comes to you. And that's basically, have you thought about issuing certificate to become a trusted user? Maybe in less than a minute, if you could touch on that and reflect on that.
So yeah, exactly. So this is exactly the point that I was making. So just to give you one example, we've been speaking to one of the largest furniture makers in the UK and exporter into the EU, and this is exactly what they're doing. To repair their products, they are going through that certification process. So the OEMs or the economic operators will do that rather than the DPP service providers themselves. But that's actually already happening.
Okay. So I just thanks Sohag for the answers, Mariana. Many thanks also to you for your time. And I want to thank everyone once again. We don't have much more time, and I want to stick to the plan as 1 hour. So basically, we have more questions. We don't have time to answer them, but we are available to answer all your questions. Again, all the channels that you can get in contact or in touch with us basically is on the screen. please take a moment, scan the QR code, or write us an email. We would be more than happy to get in touch with you and just answer your questions, or you get automatically the newsletter or our social media feeds, and then we would be very happy to have you. Once again, thank you all. And also special thanks to Mariana and Sohag, and also the communication teams from Base and TVS who made it happen. And then I wish you all a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.